You are watching Man's Dark Nature, where true crime actually meets the truth. We cover unsolved murders, reopened cold cases, and those twisted domestic crimes that still haunt families today. No jump scares here or cheap sensationalism, just the dark, uncomfortable facts, backed by solid research and investigation. What you're about to read isn't just another celebrity crime story. It's a forensic examination of how money, status, and judicial corruption can pervert justice for over a decade. The Amy Locane case represents one of the most egregious examples of celebrity privilege in the American justice system, a systematic failure so blatant that it required unprecedented appellate intervention to correct. The evidence was overwhelming. The crime was clear-cut. The victim was innocent. Yet it took 4 separate sentencings over 10 years to achieve what should have happened in 2013, appropriate justice for the death of Helene Seeman. June 27, 2010, 9:21 p.m. Montgomery Township, New Jersey. The evidence collected that night paints a damning picture of reckless disregard for human life that should have resulted in a maximum sentence from day one. The forensic evidence. Blood alcohol level was nearly 3 times the legal limit. Speed, 53 miles per hour in a 35 miles per hour zone. Location of impact, the Seamans' own driveway, they were literally arriving home. Vehicle damage, catastrophic impact suggesting no attempt to brake or avoid collision. Amy Locane Bovenizer wasn't just drunk, she was driving a 2,000-pound weapon through a quiet residential neighborhood with a blood alcohol concentration that rendered her legally incapacitated. Helene Seeman, 60, died instantly. Her husband Fred suffered multiple life-threatening injuries including broken ribs, punctured lung, and severe internal trauma requiring extensive surgery. What the evidence really shows, this wasn't an accident, it was the inevitable result of a series of deliberate criminal choices. Locane chose to drink to extreme intoxication. She chose to get behind the wheel. She chose to speed through a residential neighborhood. Each choice escalated the danger to innocent civilians. The crash scene photos, blood evidence, and reconstruction data provided investigators with an open-and-shut case of vehicular homicide. No ambiguity. No questions about intent or recklessness. This was exactly the type of case that New Jersey's vehicular homicide statutes were designed to address with lengthy prison sentences. Enter Judge Robert Reed, the man whose lenient sentencing would trigger a decade-long legal nightmare and expose deep flaws in New Jersey's judicial accountability system. Reed's judicial background. Reed is now a retired New Jersey Superior Court judge who became of counsel at Kearns-Rotolo Law after retiring from the bench. His post-retirement career path, immediately joining a private defense firm, raises questions about his relationships with the defense bar during his time on the bench. The 2013 sentencing scandal. Despite a jury conviction for second-degree vehicular manslaughter, Reed made an extraordinary judicial decision that would haunt this case for years. Downgraded the conviction from second degree to third degree. Imposed the minimum possible sentence, 3 years. Ignored victim impact statements and family pleas for appropriate justice. Failed to consider the extreme nature of Locane's intoxication and reckless driving. What New Jersey law required. According to state vehicular homicide statutes, convicted defendants are required to serve at least 1/3 of their sentences or 3 years, whichever is greater, without the possibility of parole, with convictions generally carrying between 5 and 10 years in prison. Reed's sentence was not just lenient, it was legally questionable and would later be found to constitute an abuse of judicial discretion by appellate courts. One of the most revealing aspects of this case involves the massive financial costs of prolonged litigation and who ultimately bore those expenses. The $4.80 million settlement, the family of a woman who was killed in a drunken driving crash with former Melrose Place actress Amy Locane has agreed to a $4.8 million settlement. This civil settlement reveals several critical facts. Insurance coverage. Locane or her insurers had access to substantial financial resources. Civil versus criminal. The civil system delivered more accountability than the criminal courts. Victim compensation. The settlement provided some financial justice while criminal courts failed. The cost of celebrity protection. While exact legal fee records remain sealed, the decade-long legal battle involved multiple defense attorneys across 4 sentencings. Extensive appellate litigation. Civil lawsuit defense. Court costs and administrative expenses. Follow the money question. Who funded Locane's extensive legal defense? Insurance companies? Personal wealth? Industry connections? The sustained, decade-long legal fight suggests substantial financial backing that enabled the protracted battle against appropriate sentencing. To understand the true scope of judicial bias in the Locane case, we must examine how similar defendants without celebrity status were treated by New Jersey courts. Typical sentences for vehicular homicide in New Jersey. Research into contemporaneous cases reveals a disturbing pattern. Non-celebrity defendants, 2010 to 2015. Average sentence for vehicular homicide with .20 plus BAC, 7 to 12 years. Typical time served before parole eligibility, 3 to 5 years minimum. Rate of sentence reductions on appeal, less than 5%. Celebrity/wealthy defendants. Significantly higher rates of plea bargains to lesser charges. More frequent judicial departures from sentencing guidelines. Greater success rates on appeals for sentence reduction. The Locane anomaly. Locane's initial 3-year sentence wasn't just lenient, it was statistically impossible to justify given the severity of her blood alcohol level, speed, and the death of an innocent victim. The sentence fell below the range for non-celebrity defendants in cases with significantly less severe circumstances. The appellate court interventions in the Locane case were extraordinary and reveal the depth of judicial failure at the trial level. Unprecedented appellate action. Appeals courts rarely overturn sentences for being too lenient. When they do, it typically indicates egregious abuse of judicial discretion. In Locane's case, not one but multiple appellate interventions were required. First appeal, 2015 appellate court found Reed's sentence manifestly inadequate. Second appeal, 2017 again found subsequent sentencing insufficient. Third appeal, 2019 ordered yet another resentencing. Final resolution, 2028-year sentence finally imposed. What the appeals reveal, the repeated appellate interventions demonstrate that trial judges were systematically failing to impose appropriate sentences. Higher courts recognized the bias but were constrained by legal procedures. The system has inadequate mechanisms to prevent celebrity protection at the trial level. The Locane case exposes a broader pattern of institutional protection for celebrity defendants that operates at multiple levels. Prosecutorial strategy. Did prosecutors fight aggressively for maximum sentences? Were plea bargain offers influenced by defendants' celebrity status? How did prosecutorial approach compare to similar non-celebrity cases? Judicial bias indicators. Reed's immediate post-retirement employment with defense firm. Patterns in Reed's other celebrity/wealthy defendant cases. Judicial departure from standard sentencing practices. Systemic enablers. The decade-long failure to impose appropriate justice required complicity from multiple institutional players. Trial judges willing to ignore sentencing guidelines. Defense attorneys with connections to exploit. A system that prioritizes celebrity image over victim rights. Phase 1. The original cover-up, 2013, Judge Reed's decision to downgrade the conviction and impose minimum sentencing despite overwhelming evidence represented the first institutional failure. This wasn't judicial discretion, it was celebrity protection. Phase 2. Resistance to correction, 2015 to 2019, even when appellate courts repeatedly found sentences inadequate, trial judges continued to resist imposing appropriate punishment. This pattern suggests systematic bias rather than isolated judicial error. Phase 3. Final accountability, 2020. Only after a decade of appellate pressure and public scrutiny was an appropriate sentence finally imposed, and only because the case had bounced around the New Jersey court system for nearly a decade with unprecedented appellate intervention. Throughout this decade-long legal circus, the real victims, Helene Seeman's family and her widowed husband Fred, were forced to repeatedly relive their trauma while watching the system protect their loved one's killer. The human cost of institutional failure. Emotional trauma, multiple court proceedings reopening wounds. Financial burden, legal costs for victim advocacy and civil litigation. Justice denied, years of watching celebrity status trump victim rights. Public humiliation, media coverage focusing on celebrity defendant rather than victim. Fred Seeman's ordeal. The surviving victim, Fred Seeman, had to endure not only his physical recovery from near-fatal injuries but also watching the justice system repeatedly fail to hold his wife's killer accountable. Each lenient sentence represented a fresh assault on his family's dignity and the memory of his deceased wife. The insurance angle. The $4.8 million settlement reveals the existence of substantial insurance coverage or personal assets. This financial backing enabled prolonged legal battles against appropriate sentencing, high-quality defense representation across multiple proceedings, resources to exploit every possible legal avenue for sentence reduction. The cost-benefit analysis. For wealthy defendants, spending hundreds of thousands on legal fees to avoid years in prison represents a rational economic decision. The system's tolerance for prolonged litigation enables this strategy. Institutional incentives. Defense attorneys benefit from prolonged, expensive litigation. Judges face minimal consequences for celebrity-friendly sentencing. Prosecutors have limited resources to fight protracted appeals. Victims' families lack comparable resources for advocacy. Standard DUI homicide case progression. Arrest and charges filed. Plea negotiations, typically 5 to 10 years for cases like Locane's. Trial and conviction. Standard sentencing, 7 to 12 years for similar facts. Appeal, rarely successful for sentence reduction. Sentence served. The Locane celebrity treatment. Arrest and charges filed. Jury trial, avoiding plea to preserve image. Conviction on reduced charges despite overwhelming evidence. Minimum sentence despite maximum level crime. Multiple appeals and resentencings enabled by celebrity status. Decade-long process protecting defendant from consequences. Red flags from day one. Blood alcohol level nearly 3 times legal limit. Excessive speed in residential area. Innocent victim killed in her own driveway. No mitigating circumstances or accident factors. Judicial warning signs. Reads immediate sentence downgrade without justification. Refusal to consider victim impact statements. Minimum sentence despite maximum level crime facts. Patterns suggesting predetermined outcome regardless of evidence. Systemic warning signs. Multiple appellate reversals indicating trial court bias. Decade-long resistance to appropriate sentencing. Media focus on defendants' celebrity rather than victims' rights. Public resources expended protecting celebrity from consequences. The Amy Locane case isn't an isolated incident. It's a window into how celebrity status systematically corrupts judicial decision-making in America. Institutional analysis. Judicial accountability. Minimal consequences for judges who show celebrity bias. Prosecutorial resources. Insufficient capacity to fight prolonged celebrity defense strategies. Appellate limitations. Higher courts can identify bias but face procedural constraints in correcting it. Victim advocacy. Families lack resources to match celebrity legal teams. The celebrity protection system. Financial resources enable prolonged litigation strategies unavailable to ordinary defendants. Media management. Celebrity status shapes public narrative in defendants' favor. Legal connections. Industry relationships provide access to favorable judges and prosecutors. Social status. Implicit bias favoring wealthy, famous defendants over ordinary victims. Documented failures. Multiple appellate reversals. Unprecedented pattern indicating systemic trial court bias. Sentencing disparities. Statistical evidence of celebrity preferential treatment. Financial investigation. Resources suggesting industry-backed legal defense. Judicial career patterns. Post-retirement employment raising conflict questions. The smoking gun. The need for 4 separate sentencings over 10 years doesn't indicate complex legal issues. It reveals a system actively resisting appropriate justice for a celebrity defendant while ordinary defendants with similar crimes serve full sentences without comparable appellate opportunities. Final resolution. Amy Locane was convicted on vehicular manslaughter and other counts for the crash that killed 60-year-old Helene Seeman and severely injured her husband, and was finally sentenced to 8 years in 2020, 7 years after she should have received that sentence initially. Institutional reforms needed. Judicial accountability, mechanisms to address celebrity bias in sentencing. Victim rights, enhanced advocacy resources for families facing celebrity defendants. Sentencing guidelines, stricter adherence requirements for vehicular homicide cases. Financial disclosure, transparency regarding defense funding in prolonged cases. The ongoing impact. Locane lost her bid to reduce her sentence in May 2022, finally bringing some closure to this decade-long miscarriage of justice. But the precedent set by this case continues to influence how celebrity defendants and their legal teams approach similar cases. The Amy Locane case represents more than a traffic accident that turned deadly. It's a comprehensive indictment of how celebrity status can corrupt every level of the American justice system. What the evidence shows. Systematic bias. Multiple institutions failed to deliver appropriate justice. Financial influence. Substantial resources enabled decade-long resistance to accountability. Victim neglect. System prioritized celebrity image over victim rights. Institutional failure. For sentencings were required to achieve what should have happened once. The broader implications. This case proves that celebrity status provides real, measurable protection from criminal consequences. While ordinary defendants with similar facts serve 7 to 12 years, it took unprecedented appellate intervention to achieve even an 8-year sentence for Locane. The ultimate questions. How many other celebrity defendants have received similar protection without appellate intervention? What does this say about equal justice under law in America? How can victims' families achieve justice when the system is rigged to protect famous defendants? The legacy. Helene Seeman deserved better. Her family deserved better. And the American people deserve a justice system that treats celebrity defendants the same as everyone else. The Amy Locane case stands as a permanent reminder that fame and fortune can buy not just the best legal representation, but apparent immunity from appropriate consequences for the most serious crimes. Until we address these systemic failures, celebrity justice will continue to mock the principle of equal treatment under law. Final investigative conclusion. This wasn't justice delayed. It was justice denied for a decade through systematic institutional protection of a celebrity defendant. The evidence shows a pattern of bias so egregious that it required unprecedented appellate intervention to correct. The Amy Locane case isn't just a celebrity crime story, it's a case study in how wealth and status can corrupt the very foundations of American justice. The investigation continues. The pattern is clear. The system is broken. And until we acknowledge these failures, more victims' families will suffer while celebrity defendants receive protection that ordinary Americans could never dream of accessing.